Now let's look at an example of event propagation, otherwise known as bubbling. And I'm going to start with a new set of files here. So let me go ahead and create a new file and save it as bubbles.html. And I'll go ahead and add the usual doc type HTML, head, title, bubbles. Close the head, body tag, close the body, close the HTML. And then I'm going to include a link. Rel is style sheet. href is bubbles.css. And a script source is bubbles.js. Close my script tag, save. And then for bubbles.css, I'll just go ahead and save this as bubbles.css. And then I'll save another one as bubbles.js. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some background text, and I'm going to go to open a new tab, and I'm going to Google for lorem ipsum. And I'll just pick this first link, www.lipsum.com. And at the bottom, you'll see a link for generate lorem ipsum. And let's go for 20 paragraphs. Generate. And so here's my boilerplate text. Now I'm going to right click and view page source. And I'm going to find where the content actually starts, and it's this h1 tag. So I'm going to copy everything from that h1 all the way down to where these divs are, where these closing divs are. And then I'm going to go back to my HTML, and I'm just going to put a couple of blank lines in there, paste everything in, and a couple of blank lines, and save. So let's go ahead and load that. So that's going to be at localhost CIS 133W week 8 bubbles.html. Okay, so here's my lorem ipsum text. Now what I want to do is I want to use HTML and CSS to create a modal dialog. And so that's basically a centered div box that can have some buttons in it and possibly some type-in boxes and things like that. That's fixed on the screen in the center. And then there's going to be a layer that is half opaque that covers the whole background and is going to not allow you to click on the background. So let's go ahead and start on that. So at the very top, I'm going to create a div box to hold my background. And inside of that is going to be the div for the dialog. And then just to get started, let me go ahead and put the text test dialog, and I'll put a break, and then I'll put input type equals button. And we'll put an ID there. And some text for the button. Okay, so let's go ahead and reload. Now we haven't styled this yet, so it'll just be at the top of the page, and it is. So now let's go ahead and style the background in bubbles.css. So that's background. And don't worry if you don't get all of this. You will if you take a CSS course or work with it for a while. But I'm going to make this be, so I always want it to cover the page, the full page, no matter how I scroll. And so the position of the background is going to be fixed, and the top left is going to be the top left of the body, and the width is going to be 100%, and the height is going to be 100%. And then there's going to be some color, background color, and it's going to be partly transparent. So that's going to look like position fixed, top is 0 pixels, left is 0 pixels, width is 100%, height is 100%, and then the background. So one little weirdness is I want the background to be half opaque, semi-transparent, but I want the foreground, the dialog box, which is going to be a child, I want that to be fully opaque. And so you have to use an RGBA value to do that for color. So we'll do RGBA, and then red component is going to be half, green is going to be half, blue is going to be half, and then for alpha, that's how opaque it is. I'm going to use 0.5, which is 50% opacity. And then everything inside this box, I want to text align center. So let's go ahead and reload now. Good. So you see that the background is covered by something that's somewhat opaque. And if I scroll, it stays in fixed position. So now I have to style this dialog. And this is going to be a child of the background, so I want to make the position here be relative. So I want to center it horizontally and vertically. To center it vertically, I make position relative, and then put the top 50% down. So now the top of the box is going to be the center of the screen, and then I need to shift it up by about half of the height of the dialog. So to shift it up, I'm going to use transform, and I'm going to translate Y up 50% of the height of the element. So now I want it to be white, and then displays an inline block so that it just fits the stuff inside of it. And then we'll add some padding around the content. So let's say 20 pixels of padding, so there's some space. And then let's add a border. This time I'll use 2 pixel solid black. And then just for a little 3D effect, I'm going to use a box shadow. And let's say put 6 pixels of shadow at the bottom and 6 pixels on the right, or vice versa. I think this is right and this is bottom. And then we're going to blur the shadow as well so it looks a little 3D-ish. And then we need the shadow color. So that's going to be RGBA, and I'll make that black, but I'll make it half opaque. So that should be it. Let's go ahead and see what we have now. Okay, so there's our dialog box, and it's got a click me button. Let's go ahead and put that test dialog in a paragraph so there's some space for the button. Just to space it out a little bit. Okay, so that's good enough for now. So what I want to do is when the page is loaded, I want to put click event handlers on this button and also on the background. Because if I click on this, I want to handle the dialog, do whatever that's going to do. But if I click off of the dialog, click on the background, I just want to remove everything. So it's going to prevent me from clicking on anything on this text back here. But clicking over here will close this dialog. So let's go to the bubbles.js. And I'm going to add an event listener to the window. So on load, and I don't need the event here, so I'm not going to bother grabbing that. So document.get element by ID background, add event listener, click, function sub event. So there's my event listener and handler for clicks on the background. And here I'll say console.log clicked on background, and I'll log event. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the dialog. Clicked on dialog. Actually, I want to do this for the button. So that was input button. Okay, so that should give us enough to actually see what's happening with the events. So I'm going to go ahead and reload again, and let's open up the console. So there's some Google tag in that HTML. Let me go back to the HTML, and at the bottom you'll see some script stuff. I'm going to get rid of everything from that banner down to the closing divs. So let's try that. Okay, so no errors. So now if I click on the background, clicked on background, I have a mouse event, and you'll see the target here is that background div, and then the to element is the background div as well. But now this button is a child of the dialog, and the dialog is a child of the background. So if I click on the button, I get both clicked on input button and clicked on background. So by clicking on the button, I'm actually clicking on everything that the button is stacked inside of, including this background here. So let's look at the input button event. It shows the target is input button, to element is input button. And if I look at the background click event, I see that the target is still input button and the to element is input button. So I still know what I was clicking on, even though it was the background that got that event. So how do I prevent the background from getting that click event? Well, I could check the target. I could make sure that the target actually matches the background in the handler. But an easier way to do that is to stop propagation. So in this get element by ID, this event handler for clicks on the input button, I can say event.stopPropagation. And that will prevent the event from bubbling down to the background. So let's try that. And now if I click, I just get the click on the input button. If I click on the dialog, I get the click on the background. So I probably want to prevent that as well. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and copy that, get element by ID dialog, and if they click on anywhere on the dialog, I'm just going to stop the propagation. So let's reload. So I click on the dialog and I don't get anything. I click on the button, I get clicked on input button. I click on the background and I get clicked on background. So now what I can do is add code to the event handler that hides the background when I click, and also processes, assuming I type something in here, it processes it and does something. So I'll just stub that part in. So here's my input button. And what I'm going to do is let's just console.log user submitted something. So that's a proxy for actually interpreting the form and doing whatever I need to do with it. And then I'm going to say document.get element by ID background. And then I'm going to set the style display to none. So let's reload, click, and since the dialog was a child of the overlay, they're both hidden. So now let's put a button on the page that's going to show that dialog. So let's go ahead and at the top, right here, let's put it in a paragraph. Maybe the most obnoxious button ever. And then in my show dialog button, I'm going to add an event handler. And here I'm basically just going to set the display style for the overlay to empty, and that will cause it to be displayed. So if I reload, now you'll notice that I can't actually click on this button here because it's covered by the background. But I can click on that button, it goes away. Now I can click on the button and it shows it. So no user submitted something, but if I click here, now I get user submitted something. So the other thing I wanted to do is when you click on the background, I want to dismiss the dialog, but without executing that user submitted something. So user submitted something means that the user completed the dialog successfully. If they click on the background, I still want to dismiss the dialog, but I want to note that it was canceled instead of submitted. So that's going to be the background event handler. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this code and also console.log dialog was canceled. And I'm going to put two L's here. Not sure if it's right, but I'm going to do it. Okay, so reload. And then if I click, it goes away. but I get dialog was canceled. Whereas if I click on the button, I get user submitted something. And if I just click on the dialog but not on the button, I don't get anything.